Welcome all of you to today's conversation on using assessments in coaching. Very thrilled to have Sarah Roberts presenting on this topic. Sarah has been a trainer at the Center for Coaching Certification. We were talking about this 3 or 4 years now. Super excited to have her talking with all of you on this topic. She's got a ton of expertise to offer you, and I know you're going to love it. To give you a little bit of background on Sarah, she is a PCC credentialed coach with the International Coaching Federation. In addition to having done her CPC and CMC, she did her executive coach specialist class and the coaching experience class with us and earned that credential. She's also a member of ATD. Her business is Clarity Matters Consulting, very much focused in healthcare and government leaders. She uses assessments, training, workshops, individual and team coaching. Big part of her career has been in public healthcare access. She did retire from that formally in 2015 and has continued serving in that space with her own business and her coaching practice. Obviously, it's a thrill for all of us. Her master's is health administration. Her bachelor's is in communication. And on the assessment side of the house, Sarah is certified in DISC, 5 behaviors, EQI 2.0 and CIQ. So lots of expertise. And while she's getting herself set up and ready to go, I'm going to invite all of you in chat box. Tell Sarah, what is your favorite assessment? And just type that into chat. And Sarah, welcome, all yours.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so excited to see many of my friends from previous classes and meet some new friends. So thank you all for taking your lunch hour, if you're East Coast, to be here with me today. And I am really an assessment junkie, is really kind of the bottom line here. I've loved taking assessments for myself. And then when I learned coaching and learned the beauty of using assessments in coaching, I was all in. So I'm super excited to be here and share this with you and have you share with each other what you use and how you use it, and really want to get some good discussion here going as well. So let's take a look. What are you saying in the chat? What are they saying, Kathy? Oh, you're on mute. Hey, Kathy. She's saying brilliant.
I'm being muted to be polite, and here I am talking away with it on mute. My apologies. Okay, we've got HBDI, FIRO-B, DISC and personalysis, strength finders, DISC again. Let's see, real colors, positive intelligence, saboteurs. So some great ones coming in. Thank you, everyone.
That's awesome. Yes, thank you. Some of the common ones are DISC and Myers-Briggs. And then there are many other assessments that are less well known and can be just as effective. So when you use assessments in coaching, know that they can be really powerful when you use them to facilitate their own awareness. And so some of the benefits of assessments that we see, let me get my little clicky there. Common language. So using assessments can give the client and you common language. And when you are certified in a particular assessment, you may have specific language that you use, and you have that conversation with your client about what it means. One of the things that I think is kind of funny, if you will, maybe more ironic is that lots of assessments use colors. And oftentimes we will find that the colors mean different things depending on the assessment. And so just be aware as a coach that when someone's talking about, oh, I'm a blue, oh, I'm a yellow, that real colors, insights, DISC, and emergenetics, they mean different things. And so be sure that you check with your client and make sure that you have that same common understanding. Coaching to us with assessments not only provides common language and a deeper insight and awareness, it can help really act as a mirror for your client to help them notice some blind spots, some things that they were not otherwise aware of until they took that assessment, whether it's a assessment that they take for themselves, so they're doing a self-assessment, or whether it's a 360 or even a multi-rater, which is a little different than a 360. It can really provide them that aha experience and open up some doors for them to have deeper discussions. Also, you can create new areas of focus and SMART goals. So SMART goals being specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and timely goals. And so that can really help as well. One thing that I do want to point out is that when you are administering the assessment and when you are debriefing the results, those are separate and aside from actually coaching to the assessment. So you want to be sure that you are asking a lot of open-ended questions, using your coaching skills to work with the assessment. Using assessments also can really be a great business builder for you. You'll find that clients may come to you because they say, hey, I know that you are a DISC administrator, and I see that you're a coach who uses DISC or insights or any of the number of assessments that you're used to. And so they come to you that way. They all may also come to you as for your coaching expertise, and then they discover that, hey, you've got some assessments out there that may be helpful to them. And so having that conversation. When you think about using assessments in an HR role, thinking about what the company does, and then making sure that the client is on board and fully understands the purpose and the potential of that assessment. So what we're going to talk about today is choosing an assessment. My gosh, there's so many assessments out there. Some of them are validated and reliable. Some of them are not. And the reality is that it's the information and how the client interprets the information that really is that launching pad for coaching and for self-discovery. How you administer and who administers. How you debrief and the debriefing that takes place when you have a self-assessment versus a 360 or a multi-rater. Really kind of making sure that you help the client see what is possible and what is positive. And sometimes that can be a little tricky. And then coaching using the assessment results is, of course, why we're here. So what are you measuring? Oops. There are different purposes for different assessments, and different assessments serve different purposes. So you may have an assessment that is intended to measure cognitive functioning. Okay, how well do they think? You think about IQ, the IQ assessment, that's an assessment, right? So some assessments are known, and some assessments are honestly assessments that you can create with your client. You can co-create with your client. And that's usually around behaviors and skills. Some assessments measure personality. What's your personality type? Myers-Briggs is a big one there. Motivation. So you may run into an assessment that helps a client understand what motivates them, and just as importantly, what doesn't motivate them. That can be so helpful when they are working in a certain area and it just doesn't seem right for them. And then behavior. So what are some of the behaviors that your client is demonstrating? Those are things to watch for as well. So I just want to open this up here and ask you to, if you will, raise your hand and then tell us what types of assessments you're using and what the purpose is. What are you measuring? Kathy, I may not be able to see everyone, so if you can help me with that, that'd be great.
And if somebody wants to, you're welcome to put it in chat. I see Christopher's hand up. So Christopher, do you want to unmute and share?
Sure. I did type my favorite assessment is the HBDI, which is a thinking style assessment. So I find it very, very helpful, especially in coaching, when it comes to communication and problem solving and how they're interacting with other people. Aside from that one, I'm also a big fan of the AQI 2.0. I use that one a lot too, but the HBDI is by far my favorite and the most simple to understand for the client.
Love it. Thank you so much. Who else has a share?
John, go ahead.
Oh, I was the one that typed in FIRO-B. I think I was all alone in our group. I use a lot of assessments. I use multiple assessments with clients at the same time. We do a lot of crosswalking. So thinking about your list, so FIRO-B for me is behavioral. And what I really love about it is with the executives I work with, sort of understanding what they're expressing, what they want back, what people can see, what they can't see is really relevant. And I frequently in coaching engagements will pop up the FIRO-B or Myers-Briggs or Thomas Kilmann or any of those and talk about a situation and bring them right back to the test and say, that's really interesting. Let me show you where that's going on. By the way, you test it out.
That's awesome. Thank you. And as I'm hearing these, I'm having to tell myself, okay, Sarah, you don't need to get certified in all of them, right? And so that brings me to inviting you to consider, who do you know who uses a different type of assessment, right? So partnering with each other can be very, very helpful when your client says, hey, I've heard about FIRO-B, and I'm really interested in taking that. And so working with another person who is certified to administer that can be very, very beneficial. And then you can coach after the debrief has been done. You may even take part in the debrief. You work that out with the other person. And that can be a good business builder as well. Yeah. Additional favorites that you want to share, and what are you measuring?
Sarah, I'll jump in while everybody's thinking. I actually really like the EIQ 360 because oftentimes we have leaders that are simply unaware of how they're perceived by others on that level. So I enjoy that one. And then I'm also going to throw out, several people mentioned DISC. When you are working with a team or a group, and you give everybody on the team, for example, a DIS report, you can pull a team report for free, which is
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, one of the things that I want to mention here is that those of you who are graduates of the Center for Coaching Certification, you have access to some pretty fantastic assessments on the website. So I encourage you to take a look at those as well. Yeah, there are so many fantastic assessments out there that really we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, and Anella shared in chat, she's unable to speak live and she apologized for that. She uses Personalysis because it focuses on how we solve problems, communication, and how we thrive.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So when you're using an assessment, we talked about this briefly before, but you may have a client request it. You may have a sponsor request it. So the sponsor could be the HR department, it could be a manager, it could be whoever is paying for the assessment. You also will use it when you recognize that perhaps the client is running up against the same barrier, and there becomes this pattern where the client is having trouble seeing things. They're running into their own blind spot, and they may benefit from some outside perspective. So that's a good time to have a conversation about what's available and how it can be used. And then team building. Assessments are wonderful for team building. So there may be group assessments that you are able to use, team assessments. One that I like is 5 behaviors of a team. So there's a whole bunch out there. And I know we have some Strength Finders users as well. And then even positive intelligence is something that, while it's not an assessment per se, you can go out there and take well, it is. You can take a quick assessment and find out what your saboteurs are and what your SAGE is. And so there's all sorts of different ways to use assessments. And I'm curious, what's missing from this list? What's coming up for you?
Oh, I just put in chat box the VIA. I have a lot of people, the Strengths Finder can be very expensive for people. And so they like VIA because you can get a short report for free. And then if you want to pay a little bit, get a more comprehensive report. And it's a nice alternative to that.
Yes. And actually, I've taken that. It's one that my coach used with me years ago. And so that can be very, very helpful. And it's fun to also take a look and see, how have you changed? So you can take an assessment before and take an assessment after. How have you changed based on what you decided you wanted to work on, and what steps you took to move in that direction? Yeah,
and there's a whole series on bias, implicit bias, that kind of thing. So we do a class on equity and diversity, and in there we talk about those assessments. Those are free, and you can go in and take them. And a lot of people are quite surprised by the biases that come up for them. And it's really good to have awareness of yourself. So that's another good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So before you start, you do want to make sure that you understand what they want from the assessment. And that's helpful in a couple of ways. One is that perhaps what they're looking for really isn't served best using that tool. Maybe there's something else out there. And so, excuse me, thinking about who you know that may offer other assessments, what other assessments you know about, and to Kathy's point, which ones are free? and easy to administer, right? There's a whole bunch out there. And so really want to encourage you all to get comfortable looking at what is available and what it measures, and then having that conversation. Setting confidentiality parameters with the client and the sponsor, boy, that's really critical, especially when we think about the sponsor, what's shared, what isn't shared, and being really clear up front, who gets that information, who sees it, and then making sure that you understand the assessment so that you are able to interpret correctly what the results are. When people have a negativity bias, they'll go right toward what they didn't do well. And that's something that we want to guard against. And so really understanding what's the flip side of the coin, what's the positive, and how do we help them strengthen that. Questions or comments here? For those who aren't chewing. Good? Okay.
One comment I will share,
Thank
since
you.
we have all these graduates, on the assessments 24/7 dashboard that we gave everyone, there is a ton of information. There's debriefing materials, there's facilitator guides, there are sample reports, etc. And you can access all of that from your dashboard where you give those assessments for free. If you're not finding it, they will spend time with you walking you through your own dashboard, and they're fabulous. So if you want to be comfortable understanding the different assessment tools, it's a great way to be able to do that. That's one example.
Yeah, absolutely. Another example is EQI 2.0, for example. That went in the report, they will tell you they'll give you an idea of what questions to ask, what to consider, what to look at. So it will vary depending on the assessment. Another thing I want to point out is that it is possible to coach to an assessment that that you didn't administer, that perhaps you don't know a whole lot about, because the bottom line really is, what does it mean to the client, right? What are they getting from it? The more that you understand it, of course, if your client is in a negativity bias, the more you can help them see the other side of the coin. But to do a good debrief, you want to make sure that you spend some time reflecting on the assessment report. Think about what your biases are and your implicit biases, and how are you interpreting? And this is where it can be very helpful to have a report that gives you the interpretations. That can be very, very helpful. But step back from it. Be aware of your own bias of, oh yeah, this proved exactly what I thought was going on, right? Boy, I can really see the pattern here. And be open to, wow, that's really curious. What does that mean? I wonder what was going on here. Review the results in detail so that you really have a good understanding of it, and prepare for the session that you're going to have with the client to debrief. And then you want to schedule some extra time to have that debrief. So something that I want to ask you is, what are your thoughts on sending out the assessment results in advance? What are your thoughts around that? John?
Sorry, I'm navigating the controls here. Yeah, it's an interesting subject, especially when an assessment like a 360 is going to be a little bit sharp. My policy is to give them about 36 hours. I want them to have enough time, and when people are busy, they're not going to get to it right away, perhaps, although when something comes in with their name on it, they'll look at it quicker than lots of other things. But I don't like to I don't want them to sit on it for too long, dwell on it for too long before I get to it. I also send out a little list of instructions and things to think about, pinch points, pain points, things like that, things they're proud of, and ask them not to share anything with anybody until we get an opportunity to talk.
Nice. Who else?
It's funny, John, I'm almost the exact opposite because I don't have the report go to the client first because of that negativity bias. So I have it come to me, and then when we get into the session, I'll give it to them and then have them just talk out loud as they're reviewing it, reacting to it, so that we can manage the negativity bias right there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
A lot of
I
times-
see pros and cons to both.
Definitely.
A lot of times I'm very limited in the amount of time I have with client. So by the time they try to read something, particularly if it's a 360, if it's a self-score, it's sometimes a little simpler. But there's a lot of fairly complex, they're doing a Hogan or something like that. It's just would be really difficult to do it in real time.
Yeah. Something else to consider is perhaps chunking it and debriefing a little here and a little there, depending on the amount of material and feedback to consume. Yeah, some of them are very, very detailed, and some of them are deliberately easier to navigate, and you can go deeper and deeper depending on what your time is and the needs of the client.
Hi,
Elizabeth.
Sarah. Go.
Oh, sorry, Sue.
That's okay.
Well, I was just thinking, would it be helpful for the client dependent on their temperament and their learning style? So the achiever, they're going to want to see it. They're going to want to talk about it versus, someone who is more reflective and needs space and needs time. And so taking that into consideration as to how we deliver the assessments, I think that's something I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, great point. Thanks, Elizabeth. Sue.
I just wanted to ask the group, so I've only really done one assessment that I sold and delivered to a client. Often they've coming to me with assessment results that they got someplace else, trying to make sense of it. But the one that I did do, they were pretty prescriptive in how to walk the client through the results, how to share it with them, that sort of thing. I wonder how common that is.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in here and then open it up for others. It depends on the assessment, honestly. And so like Hogan and EQI 2.0, for example, they're very prescriptive. I'm not sure about the FIRO B. John, maybe you can speak to that. And then there are like positive intelligence, for example, not descriptive. So there's a range for sure. Additional thoughts?
Yeah, so the first thing that popped in my head when Sue shared that, I was like, well, maybe there wasn't a very effective delivery method if they're coming to you and it's somewhere else. So my mind is going to the like, well, what was that experience like for them? The fact that they're, reaching out for additional support with that after having taken that assessment.
Yeah, good point, Chris. Yeah, it really speaks to the trust and safety. And so thinking about where that assessment happened. Did it happen at work and people were not feeling vulnerable? What's the situation? And deep assessments can be used without any coaching following them. And that's common.
We actually see that sometimes. So for example, I think you all know we have the coaching firm and we place coaches into opportunities. We have some organizations that will do an assessment internally And those assessments are fairly expensive, and having someone certified in that assessment then be the coach may or may not serve them well, because that person may or may not be a coach. Being certified in assessment doesn't mean you know what coaching is or how to do that well. So it is fairly common for organizations to get the assessment because that's what they use and they're sold on it, and then turn around and bring us in to coach after the fact. And they'll share the report with us because that's a framework or a foundation, if you will, for them. A different thing that I've seen happen is back to individuals will take it and then they want more.
Yeah, they may take it and think they understand it and then start ruminating about it for those people who are, longer processors, and it comes up for them, it bubbles up. Yeah, so all sorts of different scenarios. One thing that I do want to mention is that when you're doing team coaching and you've done a team assessment, when there are individual assessments that make up the team assessment, sometimes you'll find that it's important to treat that as an individual assessment and a team assessment, meaning that you want to spend time with the individual first, especially if the feedback isn't what they, what a normal person wants to hear, right? And then talk about it in terms of the team, but making sure that you are always preparing your client to be receptive and open as best you can for the results. So I mentioned that debriefing is not coaching in itself. And so I want to talk about the International Coaching Federation core competencies and how I see them relating to the coaching that you do around assessments. And so our core competency 3 is establishes and maintains agreement. And so this is really all about the client choosing what area of the report they want to focus on. It can be human nature to look at the lowest score, the area for most improvement, and it's what the client wants to focus on. So avoiding the temptation to drive and setting it in front of the client and asking them, what do you want to focus on? What is meaningful to you? What do you want to get from this? And what do you need to address in order to have that discussion? Okay, so really being curious about what the client is focusing on. Thoughts here? Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm curious from the group how you manage that client that's just going straight to the negativity and staying in that space versus viewing feedback. All feedback is good feedback. Mm-hmm. What are some thoughts from anyone?
I don't allow the client to start with a negative. Even if they've read it, and sometimes I'll get a client that hasn't read any of the positive stuff at all. Right? That's pretty common. So I ask them to stop, and I will actually be a little bit directive, and we'll go back to the positive. And I'm going to let them sit with that a little bit, and we're going to go over some of the details so that we have something to balance the constructive feedback against.
Thank you, John.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
May I go? Okay. I was gonna say, I think there's an interesting opportunity in there, with that observation, right, and just sort of sharing, right, making like, oh, okay, this is interesting to see where their mind went, and using that as an opportunity to evoke awareness about where their mind goes and how that, plays into, across the spectrum of things.
That's good. Thanks.
Renee? Oh, Renee entered the room. Okay. Who else? So I think about it in terms of giving all feedback. What did you do well? What areas are positive? And what areas surprised you? What do you want to do differently? So thinking along those lines can be helpful.
Thanks.
And as people are popping in, welcome, welcome. We are walking through the International Coaching Federation core competencies and tying them to coaching to an assessment result or results. And so then we look at core competency 4, which is cultivating trust and safety. This came up earlier with Chris mentioning, hey, what's going on when someone isn't comfortable perhaps sharing their assessment results or going into it with someone else, and they bring it up with a future coach. So thinking about providing and how you will provide that holding space, that vessel, if you will, where people feel that it's okay and safe to be able to be vulnerable. So staying with the client as they're processing and pausing to allow them to process and consider what the information is stating and what it means to them. Asking questions from a place of curiosity and ensuring that you are really working with not just the results on a surface level, but helping them understand how that impacts them. So getting to the who as well as the what. What's coming up for people here around trust and safety? Chris.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the who and the what, because that's really where mine was at here too. And there's a great opportunity that there's this with this assessment. It's like, okay, here's these facts and data, right, that tell some kind of story, and how our mindset, right, plays in to what that story is. So it's kind of an interesting conversation to separate, you know, there's the what, this assessment, and then the who side of that as well, to kind of almost like simulating and creating a situation to take a deeper look at that who side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What are some challenges that have come up for you in cultivating trust and safety when you are debriefing an assessment?
One of the things that keeps popping into my head, Sarah, is the research that if you give somebody a 360 without follow-up coaching, it more commonly has a negative impact.
Yeah, beautiful.
And it's back to what everybody was talking about, that tendency to go to the negative and focus on that. And so, as Chris said, noticing that and then asking the question, okay, so what are you focusing on, and how does it serve you to focus on that? And what else is there to take a look at? And what are the benefits of focusing there?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And those are some great questions to think about when we talk about powerful questions here in a bit as well. So hold on to that thought, please, because I want to invite you to bring those back up. Yeah, absolutely. Really creating that safe space for them by helping them see the positive and being comfortable with them, which gets into the maintaining the presence as well. And so when we look at maintaining presence, we want to, did I just do maintaining presence? sorry. Okay. When we look at maintaining presence, sorry, you definitely want to be sure that you're staying with the client, right? And that you are giving them that space and that grace to express what is coming up for them. And of course, it requires the cultivating trust and safety in order to be able to do this, but you want to stay with your client and you want to be curious about what they're saying and why they're saying it. So these all tie together very nicely. And you'll see that as we are moving forward. For those of you who are perhaps not aware of the core competencies, now you are. Added benefit. Okay, so then we take a look at core competency 6, which is listening actively. And when we're listening actively, well, let me just ask you, what does that look like for you? What does that sound like for you? Elizabeth.
A couple things come up for me. One is allowing that silence and rephrasing so the client knows, I hear you.
Yeah. Beautiful. Chris.
Yeah, I think there's the aspect here too of the listening to what they're not saying as well when something like this comes up, especially if you're in the beginning of this relationship with somebody and establishing that trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you want to explore the words that the client is using and listen for what isn't said as well as what's said, just as Chris mentioned. And what are the patterns that you are noticing? What are the emotions around certain words that they're saying? What are the energy shifts that are happening for them? And looking at that and listening from a holistic standpoint of, who is this person and what does this mean to them? And then, of course, when you're coaching, you definitely want to rephrase and restate for the client's purposes so that they have that clarity and that understanding. It can be surprising sometimes for the client to hear what they were thinking, and it gives them an opportunity to delve deeper or change their perception, change their thoughts. So really beautiful process. And then evoking awareness is our core competency 7. And really, this is the overall beauty from my perspective of any assessment, is that it helps them create awareness for themselves that they then will share with you. So this is all about asking questions and sharing observations with them, especially when you're seeing patterns, when you're seeing a negativity bias. Perhaps you're seeing someone who is less willing to take a look at some of the responses from a 360 that have been provided because they're uncomfortable with it. And so being comfortable, challenging, getting their permission to challenge some of their thinking and provide some observations for them. I noticed that this area is coming up here in your assessment, and it appears that you are discounting that or something along those lines, right? What's happening there? How are you seeing this? What's going on? And then to ask them questions that help them explore beyond their current thinking. So we talked about an achiever earlier on, and thinking about the achiever in terms of how do you get the achiever to take time to actually read what has been presented and absorb that? And how do you get someone who is more of a pleaser to kind of come out of the depths of, oh my gosh, someone doesn't like me, right? And how do you address those areas based on their personality? Questions, comments here? What's coming up for you?
All right, I don't want to dominate anything, but since somebody else is talking, like that question of, as a result of this conversation, what do you want to do differently? To really, when you're get your head down and you're looking at the results and you're processing all this kind of stuff, supporting them to make that shift to say, what's the gift or opportunity now that you have this feedback, regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah, beautiful. Love
Yeah, and
that.
on that same note, Chris, even saying to them, imagine taking this assessment again in 6 months or a year. What do you want the results to be? And how do you get there?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So thank you for that natural segue into our powerful coaching questions. So I just really want to offer this opportunity for us to all brainstorm. What are some powerful coaching questions that you use now, that you are thinking about using, that are coming up for you as a result of our conversation?
Well, an obvious one for me is, what do you want to do with what you learned today?
Nice.
Yeah, and John, even before they see the assessment, what do you want to get out of this assessment?
Mhm. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Yeah, so when a client is in this space of feedback they didn't expect, not measuring up to what they want to be or how they perceive themselves, helping them and evoking the awareness around, oh, I'm asking a question. So the question would be, how is this information beneficial for you?
Yeah. Yeah. What surprised you from the results? What are some others? So you can popcorn a couple more of them out here. You can take away.
Maybe following with Elizabeth, it's not powerful and close-ended, but does this data align with how you see yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, so how does this data align with how you see yourself?
Yeah.
And Sarah, you mentioned what surprised you. Makes me think, what did you expect?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. That what did you expect? What surprised you? Use those in conjunction. Yeah. What else is coming up for folks?
Yeah, I think there's some power too in part of the what didn't surprise you side of stuff, because sometimes it's when we do have certain awareness about habits and behaviors that we've just accepted because we felt powerless to be able to change them. So I think there's some gold in that side of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely some gold there. Yeah, thinking about some of the words that perhaps they're hooked on. What does that word mean to you?
I'm also thinking, depending on the individual, the information you're getting in this assessment, how is that impacting your career?
Yes. Yes. And when you've got someone who is taking an assessment because they're trying to learn more about themselves in order to find the career that is going to be meaningful. Got a whole series of questions you can ask there as well. Yeah. Additional powerful questions.
One of the things I was thinking about too, and not so much, in the now with the assessment, when you're working with leaders, connecting to things later. Oftentimes my clients I work with, we talk about giving feedback, to people and the difficulty there. And this is a great thing to kind of tap in and go back to about the emotions and the different feelings that they had when they received this feedback, to create awareness or empathy later on.
Very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So a question based on something that just triggered in my brain when Chris was speaking is around, who do you want to be?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if they're like, oh, this assessment's terrible or whatever they're saying. Oh, I don't agree with it. Okay.
Yeah.
Who do you want to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we speak to, I think, John, you were talking about it earlier, somebody's headed to that negativity bias, literally asking, what are the good things this is telling you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to that gift and opportunity, right? How do you look at that? Absolutely. Okay, great. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, and you heard something that you hadn't considered before that you have in your back pocket as a tool. And remember that really the most powerful questions are short and simple, right? So from a place of curiosity, for sure. So some things for you to consider here going forward, and as you embark on your day, the rest of your day, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you, is think about what assessments have you heard about? What did you learn today that is new that you didn't know about? And what do you want to know more about? Thinking about the different types of assessments and what they measure. Also consider the importance, or perhaps maybe not so important to you, in terms of, is it validated and reliable, or is it just a, what's your favorite color? What kind of Disney, prince do you want to be, right? And so assessments can be fun. They can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and thinking about what is the purpose of doing it and how are you using that information. Also think about, in terms of opportunities for use for your building, your business building. How long does it take to become certified, and is that necessary? I'll give an example here. I told you, being vulnerable, that I'm kind of an assessment junkie. I'm fascinated about learning more about myself and learning more about others. And I was on a journey to get certified in an assessment, and I realized 3/4 of the way through that, you know what, I'm never going to use this, because it wasn't my style. And so be thinking about what resonates for you, and does it make sense? Does it feel natural for you to debrief that with someone, or are you going to be looking at a graph and saying, holy cow, this is really complicated, or this is too simplistic? So really looking to yourself in terms of that, how long does it take to become certified? Do you want to be certified? Do you need to be certified? And how much does the certification cost, right? So Kathy mentioned this earlier. There are a lot of great things out there that are free. And I mentioned this, the cost and ease of using the assessment. You using the assessment, and your client using the assessment. Common questions that'll come up is, how long is this going to take? Right? I can hear the achiever. Oh my gosh, I got to fill out another assessment. And so being aware of that. What are some other considerations around assessments as you administer them that you want to share?
Sarah, I'd like to echo your point about the simplicity of assessments. I like to pair Myers-Briggs, FIRO-B, and Thomas Kilmann because they're simple, they're easy to debrief, they connect really well. And for example, I'm certified in Hogan. I've used it occasionally, mostly because very sophisticated clients that have used everything else, big companies want to use Hogan. I find it very clunky, and I've never had a client really understand it. So when I choose my own, I choose the ones that are simple and the ones that really connect, and I can connect back to the work.
John, thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful.
I know one thing I would add, I work at in an organization, so it's all internal coaching, whether that be positions, residents, or administrative staff. I'm in healthcare, but I think it's really, really important and paramount to have a strategy around assessments and choosing the right assessment for the right person at the right time. For instance, I have a very large population of residents and physicians, and I find like the CPI 260 is extremely important for that particular audience because it tells the person about their leadership, their innate leadership style and abilities. HBDI I use more generally. DISC I use with generally a lower level type person. So I think you have to have a strategy around all of that to make sure that it works for me in an organization.
So what I'm hearing is thinking about how that information is going to benefit that person or a group of people based on what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you go outside of the box at times? Of course,
Right.
depending on the need of that particular person. But I just, overall, the whole importance of just having a strategy around it from an organizational perspective.
Yes. Yeah. And also thinking about it in terms of sometimes assessments, this has been my experience, it feels like they can be the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year. And you can spend a lot of money and time chasing, right? Oh, everybody wants strengths finders. Oh, everybody wants emotional intelligence. Everybody wants this, right? And so being aware of that and looking at, okay, what do I want to use and what is appropriate for the client? And if it is something that you don't have the certification is, then have a conversation with somebody who does, right? I've done that with Strength Finders and Hogan. So
Yeah, and I was going to say the dashboard you all have, you can start giving assessments right away, whether or not you're certified. We actually did a program on assessment debriefing as a coach versus somebody who's certified in that assessment tool. Somebody who's certified is set up and prepared to give analysis and specific information, whereas as a coach, if I'm not certified in the assessment, it really is the coaching questions, and there's pros and cons to both approaches.
yeah,
It's a way for you to dip your toe in the water and get started because those assessments are so inexpensive for us through that dashboard.
yes,
And if you then use an assessment a few times and say, okay, this one is really adding value for clients, it may make sense to think about getting certified, and you can start doing that. So some assessments you can play with before you get certified, some you can't.
yeah, that's so true. So true. Well, I really want to thank you for your attendance today and for your contributions, your shares, and I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sarah. I definitely appreciate all of you being here. We will, of course, send out an email with a link to the recording on YouTube so you can access and come back again, pick it up, pick up any pieces you missed. Chris, thanks for your comment in the chat box. It was great to link it back to the core competencies. So it's a wonderful tool for coaches, for clients. And as Chris said, or Sarah said at the beginning, it's often a business builder for you as a coach too, because there are many clients that have an interest in assessments. Organizations like them, they call it evidence-based coaching. And so there can be some real value to it. So excellent. Thank you, everyone.
You
You.
take care. I hope to talk with you again.
Bye.